Rev up your engines! Now, if you know, 2021 Ford has their big F-150 hybrid. They decided, let's go into the hybrid business. Now, this is not a plug-in hybrid. It can't run on electricity alone. It's a boost system. But what a boost. It's got a 430 horsepower, 3.5-liter twin turbo, and electric motors and a battery, with 570 pound-feet of torque. So it'll be able to tow quite a bit. If you set them up, they're rated at 14,000 pounds of towing, so they can tow an awful lot. Now, the hybrid system on those comes with a knockoff plug-ins, and the fancy ones have 240 and 220 plug-ins on them. So you can use them to generate power, like if you're using them building houses in the middle of nowhere. You have to consider a truck that size, and if it's four-wheel drive, they're rated at 24 miles a gallon city and highway, the same because they regenerate when you're driving in the city with a four-wheel drive. Now, if you get just rear-wheel drive, they're 25 miles a gallon city and highway. And for a big truck like that, of course, that's phenomenal gas mileage. Plus, in Houston, people were using them to run power in their houses. Now, some people are whining that if you're sitting there running the generator, when the battery gets low, then the truck starts up and it goes up to 1,400 RPM. So people are whining, oh, it makes noise. Well, big deal, you know? You need emergency power. So if it revs up a little. When it's just sitting there idling, it's a quiet truck, right? So it makes 10 times less noise than a generator. You get a regular generator, you crank it up and it's making noise with the gas motor running. This is just a nice truck idling away quietly while it's running stuff. So a lot of people whined about that noise when it finally ran out of battery power and started to rev higher to recharge it. I think that's kind of a silly thing to complain about. I mean, if you get an F-150 that gets 25 miles a gallon with two-wheel rear-wheel drive and 24 with four-wheel drive, that's pretty phenomenal engineering. So all they last, but if they last, hey, it's a good thing you get a truck with that kind of gas mileage and that kind of horsepower and towing capability. And realize it's not a plug-in hybrid. You don't go plug it in and recharge it somewhere. You just drive it. And it charges while you're driving on the road. Mainly it's regenerating electricity when you stop and go. That's why you can get 25 miles a gallon in town, which you would never get in a gasoline pickup truck of that size, unless it was a hybrid. Brody says if the valves in a Honda engine are never adjusted, can engine damage result? Yes, over the long run. They're too loose, then you got too much play and you get too much banging, and then the metal parts will wear out faster. If it gets too tight, then the valves are too tight and they're pushed in too hard and the valves themselves will wear out. So you do want to have them adjusted on a Honda, say every 60, 80,000 miles. It's unfortunate their design is kind of old school where they got the little threaded rods. You loosen the nut and then you adjust the bolt until it's just right and then tighten them up. Now, Toyotas went to a much better design much earlier. Many of them use a stainless steel shim. Now, theoretically, they need readjusting, but I mean, I got 240,000 on my Celica and they've never been adjusted, and I checked them last year and they're still within specifications because it's stainless steel. They're not adjustable nuts and bolts. It's a stainless steel shim. It's a royal pain if they do go out, because then you got to take them apart, measure the shim that's in yours, buy a shim that's the different size so that it will be the right clearance. It's a real pain in the butt. But since they last so long, nobody really cares. Where the Hondas, you do have to adjust them. Ian Thornton says, Scotty, my 01 F-150 seems to have a hard time going into third gear and overdrive when it's cold. Can I turn the overdrive off, or is it bad for the highway? You just get worse gas mileage if you turn the overdrive on the highway. But you said when it's cold. By the time you're on the highway and driving a little, the engine's plenty warm enough that you could turn the overdrive back on. It's just old age. Things are wearing out internally. That happens. It's what? It's a 21-year-old F-150. But if it's still got the original transmission, you're getting your money's worth out of it. And yeah, you could leave the overdrive off till you get on the highway, and after maybe 5-10 minutes it's warmed up, then put it back on again. Bug Doctor says, has anyone heard from Texas lately? I tried calling him, but he hasn't responded. Well, you can't call me on my old Texas number because it doesn't exist anymore. That was a landline, and the landline is now gone. They tore the house down, the line, fiber optic cable, the garage, all my trees that I took care of, and they're building two $717,000 townhomes. My old photographer on CBS said they now have the plastic and the pipes in, and they're waiting to pour the concrete. So you're calling a number, unless you have a time machine, go back into the past, that no longer exists. I'm in Tennessee now. You want to ask me questions stuff, you just go to my website that's totally free, ScottyKilmer.com, where I answer questions there. It's free, ScottyKilmer.com, pretty simple to get to. But no, the old landline is long dead. Tim Keller says, is the new Chevy Silverado 2500 a good truck to get? Very good question. If you've followed me at all, you know I'm not a GM fan. But, and this is a humongous but, the 2500s are excellent trucks. My AC man here, Mr. Eaton, Owen Eaton, runs his own company, a bunch of guys working for him. A couple years ago, he bought a 1500 Silverado. He hated it. He said it was the worst truck he ever bought. So what did he buy last year? A 2500. He loves it. They're completely different vehicles. Their heavy-duty ones are excellent. He has a big V8. Now, kind of on the sleazy side, GM used to own Allison and they sold them back. But they got some kind of deal going that they can call them Allison branded transmissions. They are not made by Allison. They are General Motor transmissions, and they had some kind of a deal when they sold back Allison to Allison or whoever bought it that they can use the name Allison branded on their own, which is kind of a scumbag thing to do. If you don't mind the price, Owen, he didn't mind the price. He paid 40-something grand. He had it all built what he wanted so he could put his big trailer, because he does electronics and air conditioning work everywhere. If they're building a subdivision, he'll do every house in a subdivision, but it'll be all mud and stuff, so he needed a four-wheel drive vehicle, and he's real happy with it. He told them what he wanted, and they built it exactly where he wanted. They're great, but the 1500s, I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. Daryl says, Scotty, will you ever do a video with Uncle Tony's Garage since you're both in Tennessee? Well, all Scotty here works solo. I am not like Click and Clack. Click and Clack were two Italian brothers in Boston, right? They had their shtick where they'd be talking back and forth. There were two of them, they were brothers, and they had a really good thing. And then when the one brother unfortunately died of cancer, that was the end of the show. You see stuff now, it's just old repeats of the shows that they had. They worked as a pair. They didn't work alone. I, on the other hand, work alone. I don't work in pairs. Unless you can find another Scotty, and that's going to be an impossibility. So I doubt you'll ever see him with anybody but me. Once in a while, if I talk to somebody, hey, but my whole thing is my information sent out to people. People want to hear what I have to say, so that's what I do. Philip Messi says, Scotty, will the next car you buy be a Tesla? I rather doubt it. One, I am too cheap. I would never spend that kind of money on a car. Two, electrification is decades away in the United States. They can talk all they want, and it's the usual politicians, blah, blah, blah. No matter which side it is, they say the same garbage. Let's talk about who's going to build the electric infrastructure, these generation stations, right? And then they shut up and don't say anything, because that's going to cost billions, if not trillions of dollars to make the electricity capacity. And nobody wants to put money into something like that. So let's see what the real story is. We still don't know today what is going to be the winner in electric cars. Rudy Getz says, is the Toyota launch gear CVT, how does it use the same fluid if it's conventional transmission and part CVT? I love the podcast. All right, well, thanks. Toyota engineers are pretty good. It's the CVT fluid. It's just that it has a launch gear in it, and any kind of oil is going to lubricate a gear. If you go back in the olden days, I was always amazed when I saw this. It used to be that the automatic transmissions had a real light fluid, and the standard transmissions had a heavier gear oil. But then, ages ago, Volvo had a standard transmission, and it used Volvo automatic transmission fluid in it. So basically, engineers can make whatever they want, but as long as there's an oil in there lubricating and it's the correct one, it's going to work perfectly fine. Well, here's an interesting one. Massachusetts criminals are taking advantage of a loophole in a car rental law. It turns out that a lot of crimes there are being done by people renting cars, sometimes from New York State, other states, Connecticut, then coming to Massachusetts and committing crimes. And the loophole in Massachusetts is this. The rental companies have to have a proper written record on their rentals. But since the laws were old and written probably pre-computer age, here's what it says. The records are made available upon written request by a police chief, according to a statute. Well, there's crimes going on. What, the police now have to write a letter to the rental place requesting information who rented that car to find out who the criminal is? Come on now, Let's get up with the ages now. It's all done by computers anyways. They should be able to have a line with the police where they say, okay, this car's involved in a crime, who rented it? Not, you write a letter to them and then later they respond to you? Hey, get with the times, people, now. And of course, the criminals have figured this out, that, hey, if they got to write a letter, it's going to take days for them to get the information. The criminal's long gone by then. And turns out a lot of people are renting cars and doing crime. Sometimes they use girlfriends or fake names or whatever to rent cars. And they're telling the rental car places to check the people out to see, if there's strange people renting things. Now, I do have to say, you can't blame the rental car guys. If you remember that Hernandez deal, the tight end for the Patriots, that he was in prison for murder. And it turns out that he rented a car. And when he brought it back, there were bullet casings. I think there were 9mm bullet casings inside the car. And the rental guy cleaning the car said, this thing's got bullet occasions they contacted the police, and that's one of the things that led to Hernandez's downfall was they reported it. So they did their job there, but they need to change the law, have it instantaneous. So they're not waiting around asking a letter to see who rented this car, yeah? Let's get with the times here, people. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.